In this video, we'll be taking a look at 4 college basketball games happening on December 22nd, 2025, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 8 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets. As we provide these videos on a daily basis, I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 4 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start: if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Missouri versus Illinois. Bragging rights is never just another neutral floor game in late December. This matchup in St. Louis has that strange mix of holiday energy and genuine dislike, and that actually matters when you are talking about a spread as hefty as Illinois laying around 8.5 on a neutral court. You have Illinois coming in at 8-3, sitting as the number 18 team in the country, and across from them is a Missouri group at 10-2 that everybody keeps calling unproven, while quietly sweating the idea of facing them for 40 minutes. That respect the record but fade the resume vibe is basically baked into this line. Missouri plays with a personality that just tends to age well inside an underdog role, especially in a rivalry setting where nerves and whistles can tilt a favorite out of rhythm. Dennis Gates has this roster built around length on the wings, aggressive guards, and a system that encourages guys to play with freedom but still flow into real actions, not just hero ball. You see that in the way Mark Mitchell operates as a downhill scorer who also facilitates, the way Jacob Cruz stretches defenses from the perimeter, and how Anthony Robinson II reads the floor as both a scorer and setup man. It is not that Illinois cannot handle that kind of look, it is that this is exactly the type of roster that tends to hang around inside numbers like this, trading swings instead of getting buried in a single decisive run. There is also a subtle comfort factor for Missouri that the line never really captures. This is technically a neutral game, sure, but Mizzou has leaned into the bragging rights stage as a measuring stick under Gates, and it shows in how loose they play in these showcase spots. You can feel it when they start stringing together deflections, leak-outs, and quick-hit actions for shooters in transition, almost like a football team that suddenly realizes it can live in tempo. Illinois, by contrast, is walking in as the ranked side that everyone expects to prove something after that painful late loss to Nebraska, which adds a bit of weight to every possession for the favorite. That kind of pressure usually does not bother Illinois over a full season, but in a one-off rivalry game with a tight whistle and momentum swings, it tends to keep the back door open. Injury-wise, things tilt slightly toward the underdog mindset too. Illinois is still without Ty Rodgers, who has yet to play this season as he continues to work back from a serious knee issue. Missouri, on the other hand, has been missing a key spark in Jaden Stone because of a hand injury, but his status for this game has moved from out a few weeks to genuine game-time decision. Even if he does not log a full workload, just the possibility of another scoring threat stepping onto the floor forces Illinois to prep for a deeper perimeter rotation, which subtly favors the team getting the points rather than laying them. Add in the fact that last year's meeting finished with that 80-77 Illinois escape, and it is pretty clear Missouri's game model does translate to this stage. As our first pick for this matchup, the Missouri Tigers to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. The market sitting in the mid-150s is basically telling you that the books expect long stretches where both teams find their offensive groove, even if there are a few grindy segments mixed in. Honestly, when you step back and look at the way these two groups are wired, it makes sense that oddsmakers landed on an elevated number and dared people to decide whether the pace can hold up under rivalry pressure. On the Missouri side, the identity this season has been pretty clear. They play fast enough to keep you uncomfortable, and they score efficiently enough to punish you if you are even a half step late in transition or on a closeout. The Tigers are sitting at roughly 86.8 points per game on the year while allowing right around 69.8, which tells you a couple of things at once. First, they are more than happy to trade baskets for long stretches if it means they can stretch your legs and test your depth. Second, this is not some wild run-and-gun team that just gives up layup lines. There is enough defensive backbone to force opponents to actually work for their points, which can lengthen games because possessions stay live, offensive rebounds show up, and whistle-heavy stretches lead to free throws. Illinois, meanwhile, has quietly become one of the more entertaining offensive watches this season. They are scoring in the high 80s on average, and they do it with a blend of physical driving, confident perimeter shooting, and a front court that finishes plays instead of killing possessions. Kylan Boswell's control from the guard spot, the size and skill of bigs like the Ivica brothers, and the scoring punch from wings such as Andrei Stojakovic and Keaton Wagler all feed into an attack that can punish you in different ways across a single half, never mind a full 40 minutes. When an offense can toggle between downhill pressure, pick and pop, and inside-out threes, it usually drags the opponent into a game that has more possessions and more high-value shots than the raw spread might imply. Here is the thing, rivalry games like this almost always come with an emotional tax, but that tax does not always show up as missed shots. Sometimes it shows up as early fouls, extra free throws, and late-game possessions where both teams keep scoring because neither side will let go. Last year's 80-77 finish was a perfect example, not a track meet, but still a game where both teams found enough offense to stay in the 70s in a tight, late situation. With Illinois bringing in that high-octane scoring profile and Missouri already living in the mid to upper 80s on offense, plus the possibility of Jaden Stone returning to add another perimeter threat, the ingredients are there for a contest that spends long stretches flirting with a high possession count rather than shrinking into a half-court rock fight. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. East Carolina versus North Carolina. North Carolina gets one last warm-up in the Smith Center before the Atlantic Coast Conference grind hits, and East Carolina is basically the opening act walking into a headliner's arena. You can almost picture it. Crowd already loud, band blaring, and the home team sitting at 11-1, sitting safely inside the top 15 in the polls and near the top of the Atlantic Coast Conference efficiency charts, quietly beating people by more than 15 points a night across a schedule that already features Kentucky, Georgetown, East Tennessee State, and Ohio State. This is not a team searching for its identity. This is a group that has already found a style and is now just polishing it. The matchup profile does not exactly scream fair fight either. North Carolina likes to play at a brisk tempo, pushing the ball, getting early touches on the block, and turning those two-point looks into clean, high-percentage shots. They hammer the glass on both ends, smother you inside, and over the course of 40 minutes that kind of pressure starts to feel like you are boxing a heavier weight class. It is not just the starting five doing that work either. They roll out a long front court with guys like Caleb Wilson and Henry Visar, both healthy, active, and fresh off big nights and recent wins, and then layer on a guard room that keeps the same intensity. Kyan Evans gives them a steady creator. Seth Trimble brings that defensive edge, and now that he is back and cleared after the forearm injury, he is not easing his way in. He is jumping right into real minutes, including that one-point escape against Ohio State. East Carolina, on the other hand, is living in a very different neighborhood on the spreadsheet. The Pirates sit right around .500 at 5-7, buried down in that mid-200s range in most advanced metrics, and Ken Pom has them floating in the 260s to 270s with a negative efficiency margin. They have had a couple of bright spots, including that win over Presbyterian and the recent home stretch that included Buffalo, but the overall profile is still that of a team trying to keep its head above water rather than one built to trade North Carolina's with a top 15 program for 40 minutes. And honestly, the style gap only gets harsher when you think about how this game is likely to feel on the floor. Because while North Carolina is deep and tall, East Carolina shows up thinner where it can least afford to be thin. Their main backcourt scoring is live, with someone like Tybo Bailey very much in the mix and contributing, but up front there are real holes. Rotation wing Trevian LeBeau is out for the season with that lower body issue, and forward Eli DeLaurier is sitting on the injury report with a lingering foot problem and no firm timetable. That is not theory, that is straight from official notes and current injury trackers. Now imagine trying to survive wave after wave of Carolina size in the Smith Center when you are missing that kind of length. It is a little like trying to fix a roof in a storm while someone keeps handing you heavier and heavier shingles. The building itself matters too. North Carolina is unbeaten at home, and these are not shy 2- or 3-point escapes. They just keep stacking double-digit and plenty of 20-plus point wins in Chapel Hill, and that kind of environment tends to turn modest mismatches into full-on avalanches. Odds makers have reacted exactly how you would expect and have hung a massive number on this one, with North Carolina sitting as a huge favorite around -27.5 and East Carolina getting all those points on the other side. Every trend database you scroll through will warn you that big favorites like this often fail to cover, that numbers this bloated are scary, and that teams in East Carolina's position have a habit of cashing tickets simply by not completely collapsing. And there is truth in that if you look backward. But that is the key word, backward. Those trends are built on older versions of this program and on different rosters, not this current North Carolina group with its front court fully online and its defensive identity sharpening. You have a locked-in heavyweight, just barely surviving a one-point scare against Ohio State, now walking into a final non-conference game before league play against an opponent that has been blown out whenever it stepped into top 25 traffic and that sits way down the national efficiency ladder. In a spot like that, with focus high and depth of strength, this has all the ingredients of a name-your-score night where the Tar Heels build a big lead early, let the bench join the party, and still keep the margin stretching rather than coasting to a lazy finish. Anyone who has sweated a huge favorite knows that is not always how it plays out, but here, everything from health to style to setting leans the same way. As our first pick for this matchup, the North Carolina Tar Heels to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. North Carolina is sitting right around 80 points per game while holding opponents in the mid-60s. East Carolina scores in the high 60s and gives up the mid-70s. And when you mash all that together, you land pretty naturally in that low 140s window. North Carolina home games especially like to live around the mid-140s in total points, so the opener kind of meets the teams where they already are. On the surface, you could talk yourself into the idea that this is the book just splitting the difference between North Carolina's offense and East Carolina's defense and calling it a day. But when you take style into account, this does not really smell like a sleepy December rock fight. Both teams are comfortable playing at a pace that hovers around that 70-possession neighborhood, and North Carolina's offensive personality is not built for quiet evenings. They shoot it efficiently, they generate a ton of second-chance looks by hammering the offensive glass, and they live at the free throw line thanks to an attack that invites contact instead of avoiding it. That combination is like having a car that accelerates well, brakes late, and somehow never runs out of gas. It naturally pushes scores upward, especially in a home gym where they have been comfortable running. East Carolina's offense is not on that same level. No one is pretending otherwise, but it is not harmless either. Tybo Bailey has stepped up as a real volume scoring presence out of the backcourt this season, and the Pirates have shown in their better stretches, like that run of games with UMS, North Carolina Greensboro, Buffalo, and Presbyterian, that they will keep playing, keep taking shots, and keep trading possessions even when they are chasing the game. That matters in totals. You do not necessarily need the underdog to be efficient, you just need them to be willing. A team that refuses to fold and keeps firing can do plenty of quiet damage to an over, even in a loss. Layer that mentality onto the likely game script here. North Carolina wants to run, to show off the full depth of this revamped rotation, and to make sure 8, 9, even 10 guys get real game reps before the Atlantic Coast Conference starts. East Carolina comes in overmatched, but also somewhat liberated, because in a spot like this they have nothing to protect. Foul trouble in that thin front court could send Carolina to the stripe again and again, and free throws with the clock stopped are exactly what you want if you are holding an over ticket. The one thing that usually scares people off overs and blowouts is that slow-motion final 10 minutes when the favorite walks the ball up and empties the bench. The twist with this particular North Carolina team is that their home wins have still been landing in that high 130s to low 150s pocket, even when the result was decided early. The overall Smith Center scoring profile this season sits in that mid-140s area, which quietly lines up with what the odds makers have posted. Put all of that together and you get a matchup that tilts more toward a free-flowing game than a defensive slog. Fast enough pace, an elite and aggressive offense on the favorite side, a vulnerable defense on the underdog side, and an East Carolina group that has shown it is willing to keep trading possessions instead of waving the white flag. A final score in the high 140s or even brushing into the low 150s does not feel like a wild outlier here. It feels like a very real branch of the game tree. Both teams have reasons to keep the scoreboard moving, and neither profile screams slow this down and squeeze every trip. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Davidson versus Kansas. Kansas comes into this one as the big-name host, sitting at a 9-3 record, at home in Allen Fieldhouse, with a top 20 number next to the name and a crowd that pretty much treats every possession like a playoff moment. Davidson walks in with 8 wins and 3 losses, used to quieter gyms and friendlier rims, and suddenly has to run it smooth, spacing heavy offense while 10,000 people are yelling at every catch. That shift alone changes how a team breathes on offense. Here is the thing. Kansas this season is built less like a track team and more like a construction construction crew, long arms, a deep rotation, a coach who is very comfortable with a possession-by-possession grind. The numbers back up that identity without needing to drown anyone in spreadsheets. They are scoring in the mid-70s, allowing opponents in the low 60s, and holding teams to the mid-30s from the field with barely a quarter of threes going in. That is not cute, that is oppressive. It is the sort of defense that turns nice motion offense into "can we please just get one clean look before the horn?" Now look at Davidson's personality on the other side of the ball. The Wildcats have leaned into what they do best, which is shoot. They hit just under 40% of their threes, and they knock down close to 9 triples a night. The style is almost poetic. Lots of off-ball cuts, ball swings, and shooters lifting into space rather than bruisers living on the block. The trade-off, though, is on the other end. They give up roughly 44% shooting overall, and that can be a problem against a roster that can attack from different spots on the floor and punish every small mistake. So you essentially have a shot-making underdog that thrives on rhythm running into a top 20 defense that specializes in taking rhythm away. When you fold in the personnel notes, the picture gets even clearer. Kansas still has its main frontline rotation intact, even with freshman guard Darren Peterson sitting in that frustrating day-to-day zone with a leg issue that has already stolen a chunk of his season, and freshman guard Corbin Allen parked in a redshirt spot for the year. The size and length in the Jayhawks' primary group is still there, and it is still loud. On the Davidson side, senior forward Sean Logan shows up on the reports as out for an extended stretch with an undisclosed injury, which strips the Wildcats of a big body who can absorb contact, protect the rim, and at least lean on those Kansas bigs for a while. That is not some minor footnote. That is the guy you want to soak up fouls and box out when shots go up. Add the scene around it all. Kansas just climbed to its highest AP ranking of the season at number 17, so confidence and expectations are both pointed in the same direction, and this is the final non-conference game before they jump into the Big 12 grind. You have a ranked heavyweight at home, with a top 10 caliber defensive profile, facing a good but smaller opponent that leans heavily on jump shooting and is down a key interior piece. It is not that Davidson cannot hang for stretches, especially early while legs are fresh and the threes are falling. It is that over 35 or 40 minutes, all those small edges usually stack up like chips on one side of the table. The likeliest script is a competitive first stretch, then a slow, steady pull away as Kansas's depth, defense, and rebounding start to feel like gravity on every possession. As our first pick for this matchup, the Kansas Jayhawks to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Kansas games this year have not been wild shootouts. They feel more like old-school rock fights with cleaner spacing. Kansas scores in the mid-70s on average, allows opponents in the low 60s, and a lot of that comes from deliberate half-court sets instead of constant fast breaks. It is still modern basketball, just not the Red Bull version. Davidson's scoring profile lines up in a similar neighborhood at first glance, roughly mid-70s for and high 60s against, but there is an important twist. Those numbers have come against a schedule with very few defenses that look anything like this Kansas unit. The Wildcats are crazy efficient from three, flirting with 40%, and they space the floor beautifully, but because they give up around 44% shooting on the other end, they also have an incentive to slow things down a bit in a game like this. You do not really want to get into a long, high-possession game where the bigger, deeper team can attack the paint over and over. The Sean Logan injury nudges the tempo conversation too. Without a true, fully healthy interior anchor, Davidson becomes even more perimeter-driven. That often means longer possessions, more screening actions out high, and more "let us hunt a good three" rather than quick, direct post touches. It also means they are not as well equipped to turn every Kansas miss into an immediate run-out. Instead, you get more of a cross half-court, set the table, test the defense rhythm. That kind of game flow chews up clock quietly. On the Kansas side, all signs point toward a controlled tempo rather than a track meet. This is their final tune-up before the conference slate, and coaches usually care more about habits and clean possessions than about putting up a gaudy scoreline in this spot. Add in the uncertainty around Peterson's minutes with that nagging leg situation. Even if he is available, there is every reason to manage his workload and keep things organized rather than chaotic. Throw in the recent 3-week suspension for assistant coach Joe Dooley after his DUI arrest, and you actually get another subtle reason to expect a fairly businesslike performance. Staff and players will be locked in on doing the simple things correctly, guarding hard, and getting out of the building with a tidy, low-drama result. So instead of picturing a back-and-forth fireworks show, the more realistic image is a game where Kansas defense soaks up a lot of Davidson's creative shooting. The Wildcats hit their share of threes but not enough to blow the lid off, and both teams spend long stretches in the half court. The scoreboard can still creep into the 130s, especially if there are late fouls or a small scoring burst, but everything about these profiles points toward a slightly more muted total than some might expect when they hear Davidson versus Kansas and think instant shootout. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Northern Iowa versus St. Mary's. St. Mary's at home has a very particular vibe, and it is not usually friendly to visitors in purple and gold. You have a Gales group sitting at 10-2 on the year, 7-0 in their own gym, and they have turned University Credit Union Pavilion into a kind of finishing school for visiting mid-majors. Teams come in with good records, solid systems, all the right talking points, and they still walk out after losing by 20. Look back at what they have done in Moraga so far, dropping 80 and change on St. Thomas, piling up 87 on Chattanooga, hanging 90 on Ohio, 80 on North Texas, and 96 on UC Merced. This is not a fluke hot week. It is a pattern built over years under a staff that has guided this program into postseason play season after season. Northern Iowa, to be fair, is not some soft spot on the schedule. They are 9-2. They have handled business at home, and they have picked up respectable wins over teams like Furman, Northern Illinois, Loyola Chicago, Oakland, and UIC. Plus that tight overtime escape at UC Irvine, with a close loss to Tulsa mixed in. They are sound, they are structured, and they defend with real pride, holding opponents under 60 a night and sitting right up near the top of Division I in points allowed. That is not just noise, it is a team identity. Here is the thing though, the jump from those environments to a late tip in Moraga is real. You are flying halfway across the country, playing in a small, loud gym where the locals know every whistle, and you are dealing with a St. Mary's front line that looks like a row of redwoods. Multiple 6'8" bodies, plus real 7-foot size in the rotation, lean on you on every cut and every box out. Over time, that is tiring. Uni's defense is good enough to hang early, but the question against this kind of favorite is always the same. Can they keep that same level of resistance for the full 40 when the Gales keep sending fresh size and fresh legs at them? On top of that, St. Mary's has a higher offensive ceiling when things are going right. When Joshua Dent is getting downhill and spraying the ball to shooters, we have already seen them unload, like that 88 spot they put on Florida Atlantic in their most recent home showcase. The Panthers will not just roll over, that is not how they are wired, but this setup often turns into a slow squeeze. First it is a 2-possession margin, then it is 3, then suddenly you look up and the favorite is up double digits and still running their stuff cleanly. For a spread sitting in that 11.5 to 12.5 pocket, the combination of home comfort, size edge, and a proven habit of winning by margin makes one side feel more trustworthy than the other. As our first pick for this matchup, the St. Mary's Gales to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. When it comes to the total, on paper, the raw numbers almost argue with themselves. St. Mary's is putting up about 80.4 points per game and giving up around 64.8. Northern Iowa is scoring roughly 72.4 and allowing about 57.6. If you just mash the offensive outputs together, you get something that hints at a much higher number, but the defensive numbers tug it back down. That tension is exactly why this line sits where it does. Instead of getting lost in spreadsheets, it helps to think about how these games actually feel. St. Mary's at home has been living in the 80s and even the 90s. We are talking scores like 90-60 against Ohio, 80-49 against North Texas, 96-42 against UC Merced, and that 88-75 performance against Florida Atlantic. They run their half-court sets with patience, but when they get clean looks, they do not mind stacking points. It is not a wild, run-and-gun style, more like a slow drip that fills the bucket faster than you realize. Northern Iowa lives on the other side of the personality chart. Their games usually sit in that firm, blue-collar zone. Scores like 70-54 against Furman, 70-57 against Northern Illinois, 72-51 against Loyola Chicago, 75-63 against Oakland, and 60-54 at UIC. That is not accidental. They like to grind, get a stop, run their stuff, and walk the ball up when they can. Still, even with that approach, their totals have not all been buried in the low 120s, because efficient offense at a calm tempo can still get into the mid-130s without feeling like a track meet. Here is where it gets a little tricky and kind of fun. A slow, defensive-leaning team and a more explosive home team can still combine for a number that sneaks past a modest total if a few small things happen. Shots fall early and loosen everyone up a bit. The bigs on either side start earning trips to the line. The final minute turns into that familiar scenario where both teams trade quick shots and tactical fouls to manage the clock. It does not take a wild pace for the scoreboard to climb when both sides are reasonably efficient and the number they have to clear is not massive. So while the defensive resumes are strong and there is always a risk of something like a 65-54 type of evening, the recent scoring patterns for both sides suggest a result tilted more toward the mid-130s or even the low 140s than a game stuck in the 120s. For a total sitting in the low 130s, that kind of projection matters quite a bit. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.